Hello and a very warm welcome to this special edition of Policy Watch beyond the confines of Ours TV studios in the national capital, streaming to you from Mumbai, where the government recently held the first Global Aviation Summit. And in this edition, we're going to talk about the future of aviation industry in India and the opportunities as India is set to replace United Kingdom as the third largest civil aviation market by the year 2025. And in this rendezvous, I'm joined by Mr. Jitendra Bharagava, who's the former ED of Air India and now, of course, the leading aviation expert in the country. And I'm also joined by Mr. Manod Jinnuri, who's the head of marketing and partnerships, SAAB India Technologies Private Limited. He'll give us the global perspective. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, both of you. Coming to you first, Mr. Bharagava. Air travelers are increasing at the rate of 20% in India, more than the global average of 7.9%. Investment is pegged at $15 billion by the year 2020. How do you look at the future of India's civil aviation industry?
You see, to look at the future, let's look at the past. J.R.D. Tata had given Indian aviation a head start in 1932. International operations were started by India in 1948. Air India, plus the other carriers that were there after the nationalization in 1953, was slow in growth till 1990s when ad hocism came into and several decisions got taken. But it did not take Air India or Indian aviation on a path of great growth. So it's heartening to see that the government of India is now conceptualizing a full vision program on what kind of growth that we need for the aviation sector, because aviation industry worldwide has demonstrated that it's a good catalyst for economic development, job potential. So there was no reason why Indian aviation was not put on a firm path. So it's very heartening that the government has finally realized the value and has looked at a vision program and said, this is what we are wanting, the growth. So if you look up the growth of aircraft, for example, India had 150 odd aircraft till the 90s. Then came a sudden burst. In the year 2018, 120 aircraft got added. You got 1,000 aircraft on order by various airlines, which are good for induction. So it's one side is that you have a large fleet expansion. Airports likewise, from limited 60 odd airports, there are now 102 airports in operation, and the government envisages 200 airports being utilized in the country. So when you look at it, it's a momentous growth for the Indian aviation sector. But one thing that remains a negative, I would say, is that Indian market is hugely price sensitive. So while the Indian aviation is growing at a rapid pace, largely because the airlines are stimulating it through low fares, which are not necessarily sustainable. So if you look up from the period 1990s till now, you've had about a dozen airlines which have come up and perished. We all know the financial state of Air India, Jet Airways, we're reading about it now. To make operational sustainable, it is also essential that government reflects on the taxation, not necessarily forcing the airlines to offer low fares. We recently had a parliamentary committee report headed by Derek O'Brien, which said that the airlines are overcharging. If airlines were indeed overcharging, they would have been flush with surpluses, but they're not. Most airlines are losing money. So clearly, they are not being able to recover the cost of producing a seat through fares. Now, people can ask, why is it that airlines are on a suicidal mode? Each one is looking from their perspective. If they have placed orders for a large number of aircraft which they will be inducting in the future years, they cannot sacrifice the market share, because that will negate the need for more aircraft. So to ensure that they sustain their market shares, they are sacrificing profitability, which is a very, very negative thing from Indian aviation's perspective, and which can impact the future growth of the sector.
So basically, you're talking about easing rules and providing better opportunities. I'll take that to Mr. Jinnuri. Mr. Jinnuri, India now stands at the 77th position in World Bank's Ease of Doing Business rankings. How has ease of doing business translated into the aviation sector?
See, over the last few years, of course, India has taken a lot of measures to attract foreign companies, foreign investors to come and do business in India. Of course, we should not also forget, a lot of people always complain that it is not still the best, it is still long, it is still, process-oriented or whatever. But what happened is that we should also not forget that it's a big country, it takes time. If you put in any other country 1.2 billion people, I don't think in terms of procedure we would go faster. If I take one of the countries that I represent, Sweden, we are a much smaller country. And what happened is that we are working based on the people we have in the country. In India, it's a much larger country, so it will take time over the years to reach a certain level where everybody will be happy on this.
The government has also released a report on Vision 2040 for the aviation sector. What are the broad contours of that vision?
You see, it only demonstrates the seriousness with which the government is now handling civil aviation. You not only are looking at present, but you're also embarking the trajectory for the future. This is what we wish to achieve. So it's very good that you have it on a piece of paper and people would know that these are the policies and this is the target that you wish to attain. Because ad hocism is no solution. If people who are entering the market are aware of the policies that are laid out, or what the government wishes to attain, or what kind of significance or attention it's going to get, they'll be able to plan things much better. After all, aviation sector is one which is largely private dominated. The airports, for example, more and more airports are now being brought under private ownership. Airlines are there. So since government's job is primarily to facilitate, and the vision document fortunately is very comprehensive. It's not just the question of airports and airlines that we normally equate. What we have been missing so far is the MRO facility in the country. Do we have enough pilot training establishments in the country? The answer is no. The taxation has been high. It has not been given the status of infrastructure industry where you say you get tax benefits. So there is a whole lot of things that need to be brought in by the government to ensure that the vision, that the targets being assigned under the vision document are attainable. Now what has happened, unfortunately, we all know about it, we are good at planning. But when it comes to implementation, we normally falter. So it will be in the interest of the Civil Aviation Ministry government to get requisite number of expertise from worldwide, who have the experience, they lay down the parameters that this is how we want to embark on and these are the targets we wish to achieve within a certain time frame. Because aviation industry is global in nature, India's economic development, growth, tourism, a whole lot of things depend on its sector. So one thing, we need to give credit to the government of India for realizing the need and thereby coming up with a vision document. But at the same time, it needs to exercise due caution and said nothing but the best will be acceptable, and for getting the best, if there is a need to get global expertise, let's get it.
Mr. Jinnuri, Vision 2040 talks about opportunities galore. But particularly, I'd like to understand from you the investment potential in India's aviation sector.
The minister said quite clearly that the growth is quite high to come. So obviously, any foreign company looking for business or industry will be looking at to invest in the country one way or the other. Of course, what my colleague just said now, having a vision is fine, but the way we're going to implement this has as much importance, if it's not more. If we know the rules of engagement, then it will be easy for any foreign industry to come and invest in a country.
Mr. Bharagava, this is for the first time that the government has also unveiled an air cargo policy. Now, the target is to meet 10 million tons air cargo by the year 2027. How important was it to have a comprehensive policy to achieve that objective?
See, again, there is a need to understand where was there a need for a policy. So many years after Indian aviation has been there, why is it that we are now formulating a policy? There was a time when Air India operated freighters. But the tragedy was that while we could get things going out of India, there were few things coming into India because there were restrictive practices. So the freighters were uneconomical. So international airlines set their foot on Indian soil and started dominating the market as far as the freight cargo movement is concerned. So again, one needs to say, belated though, the government needs to be credited coming out with the policy that we need to give due respect to cargo. It can't just form part of the what we say is cargo hold of a passenger aircraft, but you need to have freighters. For with freighters come the policies for faster turnaround. How do you maintain airports and how do you ensure that the freighters come and go rapidly, fill up the aircraft and go? And plus, of course, the hub and spoke that you look at it. You've got industries in various parts of the country, so the cargo can be moved to hubs and then exported worldwide. Because in today's date, when you have very high competition, now you cannot say A, B, C countries can reach a product faster to United States and Europe, but we will take our own lethargic time. It's not going to happen. Aviation industry is global. We got to be the best in the business. So this cargo policy will help get incentivized the airlines which you wanted, or a pure cargo company can come up and say, we are entering this business.
I'll take that to you, Mr. Jinnuri. What kind of opportunities do you foresee in the cargo industry for the private players?
Well, it's more an opinion that I have on the cargo business perspective. I think why do we have cargo is to reach for goods to reach a customer at the end of the day. So I think it's also related with all the, I would say, the goods in transition handling, the warehouse, the freight, the logistics, the roads, the train. So it's a much complex situation, I think. But it shows the business potential also. It's not only related to the civil aviation. It has a whole chain reaction with all the different, I would say, stakeholders in the supply chain to reach, for the goods to reach the end customer at the end of the day. So I think there's a big business, of course.
Mr. Bharagava, in the coming years, India would need more than 2,000 aircraft. Of course, we are assembling the components of aircraft, but how do we develop as a center for manufacturing an aircraft?
Well, there is potential with the market growing at 20% plus, 1,000 aircraft on order. Naturally, as market grows further, you'll need to add more aircraft. But let's look at it. There are not very many countries which have got into manufacturing of aircraft, particularly the large kind which can fly long haul. It's good to have a vision, good to say that we will start producing aircraft, but then you need certain incentives to look at it. And there are Indian companies like Larsen and Toubro, big engineering companies who could get into this business, but it's all a question of giving them enough incentives to get on and with a sustained demand. But my suggestion would be, let's first begin by setting up international level MROs in the country so that Indian airlines do not send their aircraft to major overhaul abroad at the moment. So first arrest those things, give incentives, give tax benefits, set up a platform to set up aircraft. Because what happens in aircraft industry is, you cannot say that I'm going to be producing aircraft and I only get a 70-seater aircraft, 100-seater aircraft, 150, 200, 300 seats. There are various kind of aircraft flying, short haul, long haul thing. So it's, in my opinion, a little premature to get on to this philosophy. We got to look at how many aircraft of which various kind that we need. And then you go about it, because you can't produce one, say one company will produce all. And then you have, when you start looking at the actual requirement, so you may have a commuter aircraft, a 30-seater or a 50-seater, but your requirement may be only 100 over a certain period of time, or a 200-seater aircraft, I need only 200. So this 1,000 figure and 2,000 figure that we are talking about is the collective figure of aircraft of various configurations.
Mr. Jinnuri, I'd like to get your perspective on that. Make in India initiative has been at the heart of the programs and policies of the government. Now, of course, we're talking about manufacturing aircraft in India. What kind of vistas would that open for this country?
My take is that people should not forget also, an aircraft is not manufactured in one country, in one facility. It's a worldwide supply chain that is working behind Boeing, Airbus, SAAB, or Embraer, or anybody else. So when we say manufacturing an aircraft in India, do we mean that we want to manufacture A to Z? because I don't think that's a possibility, because there's a full chain reaction again amongst all the existing supply chain that we need to bring in the country. So I think India is already manufacturing some parts of some aircraft in some certain configuration, as you mentioned, for Boeing and for the major OEMs. So I think we need to define this. And the most important thing, as my colleague said also, that these 2,000 aircraft are in various configurations. So transferring a full chain, a production chain in India for maybe 30 of them may not be viable, as well as for the local industry, as well as for the OEM to bring in the country.
Let's also talk about the drone policy at this point in time. Mr. Bharagava, how would this drone policy add new dimensions to the India's aviation sector?
You see, India is part of the global aviation sector. Things are developing fast, changes are coming about. Drone is the latest thing worldwide, I would say. It's just making its advent. It's being utilized for various services that you can offer. So India is following that global track and said, we've come out with a policy. This is the kind of advantages that will come. But let's not overlook the fact, in our country, there are a lot of things when you look at drone services, as they'll be called, the services being rendered by drones. Now, it's going to have a direct impact on the employment.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm concerned about it, that look, for example, when you say we will deliver food and other kind of a thing to various people, look at what happens to the delivery people. The people who are not amongst the educated people but can accomplish certain kind of jobs and earn their livelihood. What happens? Of course, it's going to take very many years before it gets a dimension of the size that we are talking about it. But as I've been repeatedly saying, anything and everything that is happening in the world must happen in India as well. And nothing better than having laid down a policy to ensure that it's a success. So I am more concerned that policy has been done, some thinking has gone in. Now let's get what is the best worldwide and benchmark against it, and we must have the same thing in India.
And what is that?
You see, when you look at it on this front, there are people who are going the efficiency factor, the cost factor, the safety factor. All these things will have to be taken into consideration. And plus, which is a negative thing, I would hate to say it, but I have to say it, our propensity to violate rules and regulations. This is a sector where you got to follow the norms laid out. And so this will have to be done, that this is the kind of flexibility that will be accorded, and these are the things which will just not be tolerated. So as I said, the best practices that are there, people have tried and experimented, just introduce it here. Don't try and reinvent the wheel.
Yes, Mr. Jinnuri would like to pitch in on the drone policy.
The drone is I would say, is a vision that we would like to have, of course, within the country. But rightly said, I think the drone should be used to fill a certain gap that we are not able to do at the moment with the normal means that we have at our disposal. So I think either we see it as a technology leapfrog to reach somewhere that we have a gap, or else we'll have to be a little careful exactly on the job impact that it will have, especially for a country like India, where the services are more or less on a, I would say, one-to-one. If tomorrow the drones, I mean, you have now someone driving a car to deliver a goods, now you don't need anymore the driver. Is he ready? Is he ready to have another job? No, he needs training, he needs, probably a different kind of set of knowledge and things like that. So these are the most important things. If there is a gap that we have identified where the drone can fill it, then we should go ahead quite quickly.
The world is also talking about green aviation and reducing carbon emission from the aviation sector. India joined the elite club of nations to fly an aircraft on alternative fuel, which is the biofuel. Tell me, how would that transform the aviation sector?
Well, I think we should leave the industry come up with their own research and development into this. Green aviation, of course, we have to be aware that the environment is getting affected by more and more car, more and more plane, more and more whatever you have in mind. So I don't have the solution rather, but I think that if we leave the industry and put the rules again, saying that if you want to, let's say, fly in 20 years, your flight should be completely, I would say, emission-free or less carbon dioxide emission. So I think the policy should put I would say, the rules again, and then let the industry come up with their own solution.
Yes, Mr. Bhargava would add to that.
You know, this is one industry which has taken care of carbon emissions in a big way. IATA, for example, has laid out very clear philosophy that you want to halve carbon emissions in the next 15 years. Targets set with the result we've seen aircraft and engines particularly being more efficient, energy efficient. And when you have these efficient aircraft, of course, we keep reading about in the Indian papers about the problems that Indigo and Go Air are facing with the new engines. But the reality is that these new engines burn less fuel, fly more, help you fly more. So in the efficiency, and this is one way of doing it. India on its own, for example, the first flight that took place between Dehradun and Delhi on SpiceJet using biofuel. Now, it's still going to take time. It's in a formative stage to look at it. There will be a gradual move from the ATF that we use at the moment to biofuel. And we have enough of biofuel production if we need to do it, and a good chunk of it, but government will have to spell out all things considered, cost-wise is cheaper, is cleaner, and therefore it's going to be totally beneficial to the Indian aviation industry. But when can it be scaled up is the question perhaps only time will answer.
There's also a novel element in India's aviation sector that we're talking about now is that of seaplanes. What's your take on that?
You see, one thing that we must give credit to our current government is that you are not confining yourself to the usual modes of transportation. You had trains, you had buses, you have aeroplanes for a long time, but you are not exploiting the water. So whether it's the shipment of cargo from Haldia to Varanasi through waterways or having seaplanes for movement, nothing like it since you have waterways all available in various parts of the country, that why shouldn't this be used? It is not only better, cheaper, it's a novel mode of transportation without upsetting anyone. So it's a welcome sign, I would say, that every mode of transportation is being looked at and you get the best economics going for it. So who gains ultimately? The nation gains, the people gain. So therefore, all credit to the government for charting out a course for aviation in its totality, not just planes, but even seaplanes and drones.
Another important aspect that I'd like to touch upon is that of safety in the aviation sector. Of course, India maintained the highest safety standard in 2018 and it was recognized by global auditors as well as ICAO. How can we further fortify the safety structure? Because now we'll have the drone policy, the air cargo policy, we'll have the seaplanes. I'd like to understand from you, Mr. Jinnuri.
Stringent rules, I would say. Priority number one. We can't afford that tomorrow there's an accident, especially in the aviation sector. It has so much of impact. And so therefore, I would say it's only stringent rules. And of course, rules also that we are able to do as an industry. We can't put, I would say, impossible rules, if I may use this word. So I would say just put some very strict rules and some liabilities if something wrong happens, some procedure to make sure that the maintenance and the, all these associated activities that are raising the safety and the security of these aircraft is matched in a very, very, very strict way. Simple.
Yes, Mr. Bhargava, you'd like to add to that?
You know, safety is paramount. India has had a good safety track record, but there have been certain kind of aberrations. For example, 5 years ago, FAA had downgraded India on the safety front. Now, DGCA has to be given more teeth. There was a plan some years ago of constituting Civil Aviation Authority, an independent autonomous body. Now, you can't have DGCA functioning under the Ministry of Civil Aviation where compromises can start. Breathalyzer tests for pilots. Now, there have to be adequate manpower available with DGCA to enforce rules and regulations, because you can't say, I'm 99% safe. You got to be 100% safe.
And towards the end of this edition, let's talk about the most important part, which is flying for all. The government talks about from Hawai Chappal to Hawai Jahaz ki yatra. How is the government ensuring accessibility and affordability, given the fact now that we'll also have UDAN-III routes very soon?
You see, it's a very good slogan, I would say, Hawai Chappal se Hawai Jahaj tak. Udan has not been 100% resounding success. Several airlines who were given contracts or awarded routes have not been able to operate the flights. My contention is, if you want to make Udan a success, it is not just the job of the government to fix the fare of 2,500 rupees per hour of flying, but to ensure that the costs are low and that those people who can't afford flying otherwise get the first benefit. In the current policy, there is no such criteria where only those who need will get to fly, but it first come first serve basis. I can book a ticket, though I can afford a 5,000 rupee ticket, I will take the benefit of a 2,500 rupee ticket. But there are certain infrastructure that needs to be built up. Why is it that pilots for these small ATR aircraft are being, expat pilots are being brought at $15,000 per month as cost? Now, you really can't hire pilots at that cost and then offer these low fares. So the government should have come in before the Udan was launched, that we will get the aircraft manufacturers, after there are not many manufacturers who produce 50-seater, 60-seater aircraft, set up training establishment, set up training shops, and say we are going to be providing you the basic infrastructure which government can cover through viability gap funding, rather than say we'll be route specific and say how much money you make and how much money you lose. So Udan is just the beginning. You'll cover many airports, but it would have been a greater success had some more thought got into it.
Mr. Jinnuri would like to pitch it.
It's a very good initiative. We want to connect the people at the end of the day. We want to connect people from remote areas and so on. We have so many airstrips that are not used in an optimized way. And I think it's, now we've seen over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, the government is quite open also for the industry solution that will help, and especially in the infrastructure side, to make it more affordable and make it more viable and more sustainable. So I think it's the right step. There might be a revision of the UDAN, I don't know. But I think now it's time, I think, for the government to implement few solutions that will show the result and therefore bring it to the larger scales.
All right, so on that note, thank you so much for this discussion. So clearly, the aviation sector of India has huge potential. We have programs and policies. The government is also planning to launch a mission in which India could be developed as a hub for catering to the needs of global aviation industry. That's all I had for you in this edition of Policy Watch from Mumbai. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television.